6'8" tall man in black drape blocked route waited for me in the forest. This happened a few days ago in my local public forest park in the South UK. It's a well-used area with dog walkers, runners and cyclists, even into the evening. I walk my dog there regularly and know the routes well. It was around 5 p.m., just after dusk. There was still a bit of ambient light left, but the forest itself was dark. I was making my way home and had just crossed a pedestrian bridge over the M23 to get onto the side I needed. From the bridge, there's a one-way path that curves left and slopes downward, with tall bushes on both sides. The path dips slightly about 50 meters in, and then rises again. Because of the curve in the bushes, visibility ahead is poor, especially in low light. As I started down the slope, my dog suddenly froze about 15 feet ahead of me. She wears a small red collar light, and when she stopped, that light briefly illuminated a very tall, skinny figure, around 6-7 feet to 6-8 feet, standing in the lowest point of the dip, directly in the middle of the path. I hadn't shown my torch at them yet, but there was enough light spill from the bridge and my movement for them to know I was approaching. They were already positioned there, facing uphill towards me, effectively blocking the route. In front of them was an old discolored suitcase torn at the edges, with the handle propped upright. At that point I realized I couldn't easily turn back. The bridge behind me was exposed, and would have meant retreating deeper back into the forest. I didn't want to initiate a chase. I made the decision to keep walking at a normal pace, pretending I hadn't noticed them, because I knew if I stopped, I'd likely freeze. As I got closer, the figure appeared to grow in size due to the slope and lack of visual reference points. They were very tall, wearing a long, dark, point-hooded, draped garment that went down to their feet and was shaped like an upside-down rhombus triangle. I still hadn't shown my torch directly at them because I didn't want to escalate or provoke anything unnecessarily. I had a 1,000 lumen walking torch, a clipped dog lead with a heavy metal buckle clasp, and a metal flask on me. My brain was exploding with alarm bells ringing. I was mentally weighing up options second by second. My plan was to use the torch only if I needed a brief opening to get past. When I was close enough that I had no other option, I snapped the torch directly into their face to disorient them and immediately move past. At that moment they reacted angrily and said in a deep low voice, "That's not a good idea." Their face was distorted, gaunt, shallow, covered in black stains with rotten teeth, and yellow around the pupils. I didn't stop. I sprinted uphill past them, into another wooded area off the path that was all uphill. Glancing back with the torch to see them trudging through the woods in the darkness after me, I called my dog back, turned off both her collar light and my torch and broke line of sight as quickly as I could. I kept moving until I was sure there was enough distance, then stayed low and quiet for a short time before continuing toward civilization. I could hear movement noises, heavy breathing, and sticks snapping briefly after, but I wasn't followed out of the woods. I got home safely, but the encounter really shook me, mainly because this is a public park, and the person had clearly heard or seen me coming, and chosen to wait in a narrow, dark section of the path. I'm not sure if they're living in the forest or if they just like to scare late walkers. I don't know what their intentions were, and I'm not trying to run what-if sequences in my head because I'm already struggling to make closure of it. I'm not claiming anything supernatural here, just sharing a genuinely unsettling encounter and a reminder to trust your instincts and prioritize getting out over trying to understand someone's intentions in the moment. That was creepy. But wait for the next Reddit story. I was almost kidnapped on the subway in China. Last summer, I was a foreign exchange student in Beijing, China. I traveled there alone, which put me at risk, being a girl and only 17 at the time. But China is an extremely safe country, so I wasn't too worried to be living there alone. One night, I was on the Beijing subway, heading home after a class excursion. I was exhausted from walking around all day and from the brutal summer heat. I was in line waiting to get on the subway, and I noticed a man staring at me. Being a foreigner, I was used to many people staring at me, so I didn't think anything of it. I got on the subway and sat down in a seat. The man went to the other side of the train, but he kept looking at me. I was honestly so tired that I didn't care and just nodded off in my seat. I'm not sure how long I was asleep for, but I woke up to a station announcement. I sort of opened my eyes and realized that the man was now sitting next to me. But I was so tired, I don't think I really cared. I went to go back to sleep, but as I was starting to sleep, I felt a hand on my head, push my head onto the guy's shoulder. I guess I must have been so tired that I didn't care, but I remember thinking it was sort of weird. I'm not sure how long I slept this time either, but I was woken up by a pair of hands pulling me to my feet and pushing me to walk. It took me a moment to realize that I was actually moving and open my eyes. The guy was dragging me through the subway station. After I processed what was happening, I pushed away from him and asked him what he was doing. He gave me a super creepy smile and said that he was a friend of mine and he was going to take me home. I'd never seen this man before, by the way. He reached out to guide me again, but I took a step away, telling him to leave me alone. He took my arms and tried to push me to the exit while repeating that we were friends and knew each other. I broke away again and threatened to call a security guard over. When I said this, his smile instantly dropped and he quickly walked away. I got back on the subway and rode the whole way home, tense with my eyes wide open because I was terrified to go back to sleep. Thankfully, I didn't see the man for the rest of the trip, but it definitely made me realize how actually vulnerable I was on my own. What would you do in that situation? Let me know in the comments. Now let's move into the next Reddit story. Moved out at 17. I didn't know I was being watched. It was 3 years ago. I moved into a student apartment 1 hour away from my parents' home. It was for my studies. I was 17 at the time. I had negotiated for a long time with my parents so I could live on my own and study independently, since the school was far from home. At first they were reluctant, but they eventually agreed. I had a small apartment, but I liked it. I was able to decorate it the way I wanted. I made friends quickly, and I met my best friend, Eva. Everything started when a boy moved into the apartment next to mine. At first I didn't notice him. It was only when I came back from a weekend at my parents' house that I saw a new doormat at the door next to mine. One evening, I was at the common room, a place with couches, a minibar, and a foosball table. Basically, a place where young people could hang out and pass the time. I was there with my friends when a boy entered the room. At first glance, he looked shy and especially lost. Eva suggested inviting him to join us. She got up and came back with him. He sat with us and we went around introducing ourselves. For the rest of the evening, he was quite reserved and didn't talk much, but I didn't pay much attention to it. As we went back up to our apartments, Eva discreetly told me, "Did you notice that he kept looking at you? I think he likes you." I just smiled, because at that time boys didn't interest me, and I was more focused on my studies. Wednesday was mail day. I went down to my mailbox to get my mail. Nothing special, just a postcard from my aunt who was traveling in Italy and a few ads. While flipping through them, a small piece of paper fell out with my first name written on it. I opened it, and written in pen it said, "You dress so well, you're more beautiful every day." I smiled, imagining myself in a romantic TV series, but I didn't think much of it. I talked about it with Eva, and we laughed about it. One evening, I was working in a small restaurant near my school to earn a bit of pocket money to buy groceries during the week, and occasionally treat myself to some shopping. That evening, he came in. For the story, I'll call him Dylan. He sat at the bar, and I went over to take his order. He was very smiley and talked a lot, even though I had other customers to take care of. It was only at the end of my shift, at closing time, that I realized he had stayed for 2 hours. I found that strange, but I didn't think much of it. We went back up to our apartments together. I was about to say goodbye before going into mine, but he hugged me. I was surprised. He said, "I'm happy to have a friend here. You're one of the only ones." I was very surprised, because we barely knew each other. The next day, I went to school and ran into him in the hallways. He came over to talk to me. We chatted between classes, but the conversation was only about me. He asked questions like, "What city do your parents live in? What's your class schedule? Do you have a boyfriend?" But when I asked him questions about himself, he dodged them and always brought the conversation back to me. In the days that followed, I kept running into him every morning on my way to school, in the evening when I got home, sometimes even in the school hallways, even though before we hardly ever crossed paths. I found it really strange. I talked about it with Eva and a few friends, but they all told me that maybe he just had the same schedule as me. I had thought that the little note I received in my mail might have come from him, but I didn't mention it to him. One day, while I was cooking at home, the doorbell rang. I thought it was Eva coming to pick up some of her things. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw Dylan, and he was already smiling. I hesitated to open the door, but I did anyway, reluctantly. He was holding a box of Ferrero Rocher chocolates. He handed it to me and said, "This is to thank you for being a golden friend." I thanked him and closed the door. That evening in front of the TV, something clicked. I was eating the chocolates when I remembered that the day before, I had gone grocery shopping with a friend, and we had passed by the candy aisle. She bought chocolate, and I had told her that Ferrero Rochers were my favorite, but since they were a bit expensive, I preferred to wait until next month. What was strange was that I hadn't seen Dylan in the store at any point, and I didn't remember telling him that I loved Ferrero Rocher. It bothered me a bit, but I thought maybe he had asked Eva. So I talked to her about it, and she told me he had never gone to see her. We both found it strange. As the days went by, I kept running into him more and more, and every time he came to talk to me. Honestly, it was becoming annoying. I talked about it with some friends, who simply told me to tell him the truth, that it bothered me, and that he needed to keep his distance. So one morning in the school hallways, I went up to him, stressed, and told him the truth. "Dylan, you're very kind. I know we're neighbors, but I feel like you're following me, and you think you're very close to me even though we barely know each other. You understand it's not against you, but I'd like you to keep your distance." At that moment, his face fell. He looked angry and a bit sad. It was hard, but it was better that way. Just before the end-of-year holiday period, my cousin came to visit me and stayed at my place for 2 days. We spent a good time together, and I ran into Dylan less and less. I think he was hurt, but I preferred that to him following me everywhere and talking to me non-stop. On the day I walked my cousin to the train station so he could go home, I came back and ran into Dylan in the hallway on our floor. He said hello, I said hello back, and before I went into my apartment he asked, "That boy, is he your boyfriend?" I told him no, that it was my cousin who had come to visit me before the holidays. He went back into his apartment without saying anything. One evening when I got home, there was a bouquet of flowers placed on the table in my kitchen with a small note on it. "Happy Holidays." I immediately understood it was from Dylan, but what bothered me was that the bouquet was inside my apartment. Dylan didn't have the keys to get into my place, and above all, he had no right to do that. I took the bouquet and went to ring his doorbell. I'll admit it, I was angry. He opened the door and I said, "Listen, I'm not going to repeat myself again. I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in you, and I don't want your gifts either. So please, don't waste your money, give this bouquet to someone else." His face fell again, and he just replied, "Okay." I asked him how he had managed to leave the bouquet in my apartment, and he simply told me that the building caretaker had opened my door so he could put the flowers inside. I didn't look into it any further and went back home. One night I was asleep in my bed when my doorbell rang. It scared me. I woke up with a start. I looked at the time on my phone. It was 3 a.m., and I wondered who could be disturbing me at that hour. I got up quietly and looked through the peephole, but the hallway was dark. I couldn't see anything. I stepped back slowly, and then there was a soft knock on the door. From the other side, I heard someone whisper, "Open up, I just want to explain myself." I recognized Dylan's voice. I was terrified, because it's not normal to do that kind of thing at 3 a.m. At first, I wanted to check that my door was locked, but if I made noise, he would know I was awake. So I simply went into my bathroom, the only room in my apartment that I could lock. I thought he would leave, but he kept knocking on the door harder and harder. I was terrified. I took my phone and sent a message to Eva. Of course, I didn't get a reply. No one is awake at 3 a.m., especially during the school term. Then I heard a metallic noise. That's when I realized he was trying to force the lock. My heart started racing, but I took my phone and called the police. I was so stressed that I could only give my address, my floor, and my door number. The operator told me she would stay on the line until the police arrived. I could feel him pulling on the handle, and I knew time was running out. What would happen if he managed to open the door before the police arrived? The longer I waited, the harder the blows on the door became. At one point I heard loud footsteps in the hallway and someone shouting. My heart finally calmed when I heard knocking on the door and a man shouting, "Open up, miss, this is the police." I got up and looked through the peephole. It really was the police. I opened the door, and Dylan was on the ground, handcuffed. He was furious. One officer dealt with him while the other took my statement. I told him everything from beginning to end. They said they would call me when they had more information. Then came the holiday period. I stayed at my parents' house for 2 weeks, and honestly, it did me a lot of good. The police called me back, and I was shocked when they told me they had searched Dylan's phone and laptop. They found a lot of information about me. Dylan had found all my social media accounts, even my parents' Facebook account. I also learned that he had previously assaulted his ex-girlfriend several times, and that she had even ended up in the hospital because of him. After that, I finished my studies, but I moved into a shared apartment with Eva. Today, I'm 19 years old. I still live with my parents, and I admit that I'm afraid to live alone again. I don't know when I'll have the courage to do it. How would you have reacted in my place? Let's move to our third Reddit story. Unsettling Uber ride. About a week ago, I was at a store and ordered an Uber to take me back to my mom's house. The ride is about 30 to 45 minutes, and although there are some rural areas in between, I can think of several different ways to make the ride. All on main, well-trafficked roads. I've made the drive myself many times. I'm a 27F, and the driver was probably a 50 to 60M, very nice and talkative, asking what I do for work and where I'm going, what I'm doing for the holidays, etc. After about 10 minutes, I put my headphones in, and that ends the conversation. I do notice he's going a different way than I normally do. After about another 10 minutes, I notice that we're driving on an extremely rural long road. I pull it up on the Uber map and it's very off-route. We're still driving on this one-way road for like 3 minutes, and there's a couple houses, no cars, some horses, definitely no people. At this point, I'm sitting up more alert, have taken my headphones out. He's not saying anything. I'm watching us drive down this little paved road on the map, and notice that up ahead, it appears to be a dead end. At this point, I'm getting nervous, but I'm hoping that he will come to the dead end, turn around, and we can get back on route. So at the end of this road, he makes a right into what appears to be a fucking dirt driveway. So I'm like, why are we pulling in here? And he makes some excuse about how his GPS routed him this way. I say, I really don't like this, can we get back to the main road? And he just says, oh yeah, the main road is just up here. And he continues driving down this dirt road behind these people's houses in the woods. Like it's literally an ATV trail, and he's driving between trees in his sedan. At this point, I was literally about to just jump out of the car. I was so scared. I also had my phone in my hand about to call someone, and he's literally not saying anything. Just driving with his hands on the wheel, not looking back at me, just driving like he's been on this little dirt path 100 times. And I know he has been, because this was not even a road that showed up on my map, and it was behind houses in the woods. You'd only know this was here if you've been there before. So he keeps driving, and I keep telling him we need to get back to the road, and he just keeps saying we will. After probably a full 3 minutes of driving in the woods, he takes a turn on the trail, and it takes us back onto a paved road. A little further down, another turn, and now we're back on a real road with other cars, and I suddenly feel a little safer. Then he starts laughing and being like, oh, I'm surprised the GPS took me that way. They ought to change that. That was so strange. That seemed like a private road. I don't believe a word he's saying. He purposely took that trail, because if he didn't already know it was there, he would assume it was a driveway and not turn into it like I assumed. That just leaves me wondering what his intentions were. I still had another 15 or so minutes in the car with this guy, and I literally sat with my hand on the door handle the whole time. He tried to talk to me a few more times, but I wanted no part of that ride anymore. I know for a fact his GPS did not take him that way, because my GPS did not even register it as a road. My only hope is that he figured he would just use that as a shortcut, although it made the trip longer, and overlooked how creepy the whole situation came off. What do you guys think? Anyone else thought they were about to be kidnapped while in an Uber? Let me know in the comments. Moving to our Reddit story, number 4. A stranger followed me home and knew my name. A few months ago, I was walking home from a late shift, maybe around 10:30 p.m., and noticed a man across the street who seemed to slow down every time I did. I stopped to check my phone, and he stopped too, pretending to tie his shoe while watching me out of the corner of his eye. I crossed the road, and he crossed right after me, no hesitation. At that point, I was fully alert, so I turned down a side street that leads to my flat, and I could hear his footsteps behind me getting closer. I spun around and asked, "Can I help you?" And he just stared at me for a second too long before saying, "You dropped something," even though my hands were empty. When I said I hadn't, he smiled, stepped closer, and said my first name. I've never seen this man before in my life. I backed away, ran the rest of the way home, and didn't stop until I was inside and locked the door. I checked from the window and saw him standing at the end of the street, looking straight at my building before slowly walking away. I still take a different route home now, and I never wear headphones anymore. That's it for today, guys. Hope you liked it. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe to the channel.